All right, so speciation, that's how evolution creates new species. We're also going to talk about extinction, where species will be destroyed as well. All right, so in order to get new species, they need to be isolated. And we had talked about geographic isolation, but there's lots of different ways that species can be isolated. Those ways are divided into two categories: pre-zygotic and post-zygotic. Pre-zygotic means that that's before the zygote is made. So before the egg and the sperm fuse together, there's some type of separation. Post-zygotic means that even though a zygote is created, for some reason that zygote is not viable. Either it can't proliferate itself. So this prevents the proliferation or the continuation of the species after the zygote is created. This is before the zygote is created. So all of the types we can put into one of those two categories. Right. So each of these categories here. First one is geographic isolation. This is a little bit of a review because we talked about this already. But geographic isolation means that there is a physical barrier that divides the two groups. Here's a couple of examples. With frogs, they live in this jungle here. If there's deforestation that creates a barren terrain between them, then that will cause the frogs can't go across, so now they're physically separated. Or here, these little shrimp that live here in these tropical waters, here they're separated from these ones. They can't cross over the land, they have to be in the water. So they can't be separated here. Next is temporal isolation, and temporal has to do with time. So even if they can come into contact with one another, sometimes different species breed at different times. Maybe for like these two lizards shown on the picture, maybe one group breeds during the day and another group breeds at night. Then they're not going to interact with one another, so they're not going to be able to create offspring. Or it could be seasonal. There could be a mating season for one species that's in June and another that's in May. So because they have different seasons of mating, they're not going to interact with one another. It has to do with time. That's the key for temporal, is time. Next is behavioral isolation. So even if they do breed at the same time, maybe they won't mate because they're not attracted to one another. Maybe there are very specific mating behaviors. Like these birds there do a little dance. They're called blue-footed boobies. They do a little dance to attract a mate where they like stretch their necks up and they like show off their feet that are bright blue. That attracts a mate. So if their mate can't do the right dance, then they're not going to choose that mate. We watched some other videos of this as well, with like the spider or the birds that do a little dance to attract their mate. So there has to be particular behaviors. Sometimes it's not even as obvious as the dance. It could be just some kind of courting ritual where they swim in a certain pattern for a fish or something like that, where if they don't do that, they aren't recognized as a mate. So it has to do with behavior. All right, the next one is mechanical isolation. So even if they are attracted to one another and they see each other as a viable mate, they're not physically compatible. So tab A does not fit in slot B. It just doesn't work. Not that physical ability to produce offspring. There could be some gametic isolation, where even if they are able to mate with each other, there could be chromosome incompatibilities. Maybe they have different numbers of chromosomes, so the sperm and the egg aren't able to combine together.
So is gametic isolation the same as hybrid infertility or inviability?
No, with mechanical. Do it as mechanical. So an embryo, the sperm and the egg will not be able to form a zygote. Maybe they can come into contact with one another, but they can't merge to create that zygote. The last one is hybrid inviability or infertility. So this means that even though they're different species, they do see each other as prospective mates. They're able to mate. The egg and the sperm can combine to create a zygote, but then once that organism is born, it's either inviable, meaning that it can't survive, or it is infertile, meaning it can't have its own offspring. So that's what happens here. This is a mule. Half horse, half donkey. We use mules a lot. They're good pack animals. They can carry a very heavy load, but they can't make their own offspring. You can't take two mules and make another mule. It has to be the cross between a horse and a donkey because the mule is infertile. Here's a cross between a lion and a leopard. So it looks pretty much like a leopard but with a mane. This is a horse and a zebra, sometimes called a zorse. Also a liger. Those are inviable. Without extensive medical care, they would die. So in the wild, if you were to get a liger, it would die at a very young age because they grow too much essentially. They get too big and they can't survive. But since if we breed them in captivity, then people can give them medical care to allow them to survive. In the wild, that wouldn't happen. So inviability means they would die, like a liger. Infertility means they can't have their own offspring, like a mule. Any questions? So we're going to compare share really quick. Which of these are pre-zygotic and which are post-zygotic? I'm going to call on you to share here in just a moment. So. All right, who wants to share? Which of the mechanisms are pre-zygotic? Which of the mechanisms are pre-zygotic? Mechanical?
Oh, mechanical.
Yeah, mechanical is one. What else? Because there's more than just one. What else? Behavioral?
Geographic isolation.
Geographic? Temporal. And then also gametic, right? All of those are going to be Pre-zygotic. So then which are the only two that are post-zygotic? Right, hybrid inviability or hybrid infertility are the only ones that are post-zygotic. Good job. All right, we're going to now do some patterns in evolution. We're actually going to talk first about extinction. So on your paper, if you printed the note guide, there's a place to write a definition for extinction, and then there's two types of extinction. If you're taking your own notes, please do not write every single thing that you see up on this slide. Let's make sure and take only the really key parts of this. So the evolutionary process does not produce the perfect organism. It produces the best possible for a given set of standards of the environment. So there's plenty of things that aren't 100% great, but they work, they're good enough. So sometimes they'll be good enough for a while and then end up suddenly not being good enough anymore if the environment changes, and that's when we see extinctions. So evolution does not produce the perfect organisms. It produces ones that are good enough. So the best estimates from the fossil record indicate that about 99% of species that have ever existed are now extinct. So everything that's alive on the Earth right now is really only about 1% of all the things that have ever lived, which is a very small number. There's lots of things that are extinct. So a typical lifetime for a species, how long a single species is around, is about 1 million years. And then it will either have a speciation where it diverges into two species, or it can be a phyletic speciation where it kind of merges into a new species. And we don't see that species in the fossil record anymore. Here's a picture of the whale evolution that you watched a video on before, right, where it had kind of like a wolf-like creature to maybe kind of seal-like, no, to the modern whale. So there's two types of extinction. First is background extinction, and background extinctions occur continuously and at a low rate. So background extinctions are the ones that are happening frequently, or rather frequently, and slowly. These are the kind of extinctions that we know of for organisms like the dodo bird or the Galapagos tortoise, things that just, they're the only species that die at that time. But it occurs at roughly the same rate as speciation. These are caused by local changes. So a few species in a small area occur continuously, local changes. Kind of the key points that you can put in background extinctions are continuously, few species, local changes. So whenever you hear about a species going extinct or is close to extinction, that's this type of extinction. The other type, oh, like the dodo birds here. Can you read that? It says, unbeknownst to most ornithologists, which are people who study birds, the dodo was actually a very advanced species, living alone quite peacefully until the 17th century. It was annihilated by men, rats, and dogs, as usual. So he's doing math on the rock. Calculus. Alright, so the other type is mass extinctions. And these are the type that kill many species at a global level, all at the same time. This is often found with a catastrophic event, like a meteor hitting the Earth and killing all the dinosaurs. There have been at least 5 mass extinctions in the last 600 million years. So we can see that in the fossil record. This one here kills a bunch of stuff. The peaks are the mass extinctions, where lots of things died all at the same time. So we'll see in the fossil record a bunch of things that are alive, and then all of a sudden they just disappear, all of them. And there's just a few things left, and then it increases in diversity over time, and then they all disappear, except for a few that are left. Yes, so mass extinctions, so like the extinction that killed the dinosaurs. There's been lots of them. The one that killed the dinosaurs wasn't even that big of an extinction. There's been much bigger ones previously to that, but that's just a famous one, so I don't know. All right. And that's it for the lecture. We're now going to make a fold. So I'm going to stop the recording here. You need 3 pieces of loose leaf paper, and then I'll show you what to do with them.